My name's Dr. Williams from Stark and Wayne. One of the things we've been really interested in, as I'm sure many people are, is what is Kubernetes? That's kind of interesting. What we really care about is if people are going to use it, how are we going to run it for them? And it turns out there are people in the world attempting to run things like Kubernetes without BOSH. And I don't think it's because they don't know about BOSH. I don't think it's because they know about BOSH and just think that's not the right way. It's just a lack of education. I don't believe even in 2018 there's a suitable tool that you could be using instead of BOSH. I don't mean to be so aggrandizing about BOSH. For 6 years I've been playing with BOSH, and every year I ask, like, okay, if you're not using BOSH, what are you doing? And I still have not yet seen. So if you ever find out what is the BOSH equivalent, please let me know. It might be good. But we are going to talk about BOSH. We're going to talk about running Kubernetes on BOSH and integrating with the CF router. Now, we were given instructions, strict instructions, that we must show this slide in the event of part of the aeroplane falling off and hitting the window and one of you being sucked out the window. Please rescue that person. Don't laugh at them first. I can't believe that happened twice in 1 week. And obviously, if there's a fire, you should stop burning things and please exit. So the gist of how good the experience of running Kubernetes on BOSH is kind of a two-parter. One is that sort of gimmick. That works. I'm going to run that for you in a second. But on a BOSH that's never seen Kubernetes before, there is nothing else. You run that command and output will come. A couple of caveats, but that's good. And then we're going to do the classic BOSH demo of we're going to delete some infrastructure and watch it come back. And because of the magic of what is Kubernetes, it does its job. BOSH does its job of bringing infrastructure back. All right. So this little gimmick is this bit.ly expands into a manifest, it downloads, and it's got all the pre-compiled releases, nothing to compile, you don't have to watch anything, it just starts booting up machines. So what you end up with, if you run a BOSH command, you see there's a single master and 3 workers. I'll introduce the project in general, and you can ask questions like, why is there only one master? And I will say, you must think more of etcd than everyone else does. But yes, you can expand the number of masters. And obviously, you can expand the number of workers horizontally and vertically, make them bigger. And then in Amazon, which is where I've been playing, it would look like that to show the infrastructure is running. So we're going to start with for anyone that's not aware of one of the core benefits of BOSH, we're going to do the classic BOSH demo of let's kill some things. Alrighty. Here is my infrastructure. Now this is the machines. Let's have a quick look at the, so I have a little guestbook example app running, which I will make bigger. Now, we haven't set up routing yet, so you can't actually talk to it from the internet, which we will solve by the end of our chat. But let's have a quick look of how you would interact with it in some fashion. Our little guestbook app has exposed a service through node port, which means that on this port, if I talk to the workers, that will be routed to my pod. We now need to find out the IP address of our workers. We can steal it from here. So let's just take one of these. Do a bit of curl with our 32262, and we get some HTML for our guestbook. It looks a lot better in the web, and we'll find out what that looks like later when we actually make it, put it on the internet with Cloud Foundry's router. So it's working. Now, we'll look at our nodes. That's the set of nodes running, our 3 machines represented 3 Kubernetes nodes. And let's shut one down. Everything takes time. You know when you've only got a finite amount of time, you want to share many ideas? There's only so much BOSH you can actually show. Because it's not BOSH's fault. Okay, some of it's BOSH's fault, but it's like VMs just take time to nicely shut down. And they take time to come back up. We don't have that sort of time. We're people on a move. We have other sessions later on that you probably want to see. So that's shutting down over time. Let's run this, but with a watch. And we'll start to see them shut down and then come back up. So I'm just going to introduce why I'm speaking to you. I did not write Kubernetes. It's always interesting to find out why people are talking. Typically they wrote something or they're somehow like this is their thing and they want to show it off. This is not my thing. I can argue BOSH is my thing only because I seem to have kind of put my flag on it and said I will talk about this for the rest of my life. But I find Kubernetes really interesting. And there's an entire team from Pivotal, VMware, and Google have been working on bringing Kubernetes to BOSH, or as I like to think of it the other way, which is bringing BOSH to Kubernetes. And the repos at the bottom are there. So there's a whole documentation site. And you might say, well, I'll tell you why the yellow one's the one we're going to talk about. Their documentation site is for a particular user story. And it's a super important user story. And it's the user story of people who don't have BOSH. They want Kubernetes. They need a way to deploy it at day one and to look after it for the next 5 years. Upgrades, stem cells, scaling, healing, all the things that BOSH does. So their documentation goes through that entire story. Unfortunately, there's nowhere in the story where it says, if you've already got BOSH and you're joining us, you start here. It's really awkward what they had late last year when I was sort of having a look at what they had. And so I spent a week refactoring everything. So it got two stories. There was the original story of someone who had nothing and brought up jump boxes and BOSH and brought up Kubernetes. And the story I cared about, which is I've already got those things. I just want BOSH deploy. I want that command. I'm sorry for not having a full screen. For those of you. Yeah, we don't need to see Wally again. Let's move on. 5 seconds seemed like a good idea. I wanted that story. Not necessarily with the magic URL. That's silly. You shouldn't do that. But who knows what's going to come. But I want that BOSH deploy with a base manifest that just works. That is the BOSH story of 2017, 2018, which we'll talk about with Wally later this afternoon. I wanted that. And so I did a whole bunch of refactoring. Now, if you've ever received a major pull request to your project, your first reaction is, no way am I going to merge that. And that was their first reaction. And the second reaction, the third reaction. Eventually, I worked with them, and they merged most of it. And I think they've benefited greatly. I was going to give this talk to share with you, and unfortunately, I hadn't finished it. So they're still developing the master branch. So the last thing they released might not go with the manifest that's on head, and it's a little bit confusing. And I wanted something for you that would just work, always. And so there's this other repo, which is kind of like the go here and I promise it will work. It's their stuff. It's not they did all the work and all the credit. It's a huge amount of work that they've been doing for the last year and a half. And merely that repo has a README of a tutorial for us, those of us who already have BOSH and want to get started with Kubernetes. It also includes a couple of demos of things you can run on Kubernetes because you probably don't know anything about Kubernetes like I didn't. And so that's a README and a manifest that just works. All right, let's see how our failure's going. All right, so it died, and it's come back. And that's what BOSH does for you. So it will eventually discover that machine's gone, and it will rebuild it. Now, if it's got a persistent disk, it will reattach it, not relevant here. It'll put the software back on it, and it will start it up again. Thankfully, it's Kubernetes, and Kubernetes wakes up and rejoins the cluster, and the pods get rescheduled. So now we can see that we've got a brand new machine that came up a minute ago. It's ready, and now we can keep talking to that node and the application's back. So that's the BOSH story if you're still wondering why BOSH. It also does scaling, does the upgrades, stem cells, the whole life cycle. All right, so let's get into, and that repo is going to be a full walkthrough. I'm going to start in the middle of the walkthrough because it's more exciting. Like, we're in the middle of the action. And so let's keep going. This is what we have. We have a BOSH. I trust everyone's BOSH has a UAA and Cred Hub because it's awesome. And with BOSH deployment repo, it's as easy to have UAA as Cred Hub as to not. So if that doesn't make sense to you, those words in that sentence, then come to the talk at 2:30, and we'll talk about all this stuff that's been going for the last year. On the right-hand side in the yellow is our cluster. Now, in a production environment, you probably have an environment that looks more like this. BOSH and Kubernetes are not on the public internet. That is not a happy place to put them. It might be happy for you today. Something terrible will happen, and then on that day, you'll be sad. So let's not put things on the public internet for no reason. Instead, we'll have a jump box, and we'll use that jump box to get access to our BOSH and our, and earlier on when I was interacting with it, this is me on my jump box, talking to it. By the time we finished with the router, I will have access to Kubernetes through a load balancer. Like this. So I'm going to work on the assumption that your BOSH also has Cloud Foundry. Now, you don't need to. That magic URL brings up Kubernetes. You've got a cluster, no router, none of that. You can figure that out for yourself. But if you do have Cloud Foundry already running, that means you've already got a load balancer and a routing mesh. Both you've probably got, you definitely would have the HTTP router. You may also have a TCP router. And if you do, then Kubernetes, the Kubo project, the CFCR project, can plug straight into it. And then you can start to expose your pods through that, and that's what we're going to demonstrate. There is another aspect to this, which I'm not going to spend time on because it's somewhat cloud provider specific, but Kubernetes does have the facilities to talk to the clouds itself, managing load balancers and managing volumes, for example. So a lot of that's documented in the Kubo project's documentation, and you can learn about that, or jump on the Slack channel, the CFCR Slack channel. They're super nice people. They are based in Toronto and Ireland, which I hear are lovely places. They are terribly far from Australia when it comes to time zones, which also made working on that pull request difficult. They would wake up and go, "What have you done?" Okay, but it's awesome. No, it's not awesome. That's not how we work. So we're going to work on filling this box in. So let's get back to this. I want to sort of show you that this is not just a magic trick that's just for slides. I have a BOSH that, it's a BOSH Lite. It's running on Amazon. I live in Australia where the internet's terrible, so bringing large assets onto my laptop, that's no fun. That's not good for anyone. That's why I can have a 3-year-old laptop, because the laptop is not the thing slowing me down. It's the national internet and how far away we are from America. So I tend to work on jump boxes anyway. So this one's on Amazon. But all I have to do is paste that in, and you'll see that it automatically starts downloading releases. Now, these aren't just normal BOSH releases. These are pre-compiled BOSH releases. So we're not even going to have to see things compile. It will just start booting up machines and deploying Kubernetes. I mean, downloading still takes some time, apparently. You've seen things download off the internet. I think the internet's going to be quite popular. You know, I'm a bit of a, I'd like to watch the trends, and I think the internet could take off over the next couple of years. So it's injecting all these packages into my BOSH. As you can possibly see, compiled package. They're compiled for, if you don't come and see my talk later on, since we have a few moments, they're compiled for a specific major stem cell. In this case, it's Ubuntu Trusty 3541. And as you upgrade, so another one of the benefits of compiled packages is every time I bump my minor stem cell, with all the CVEs that come out, nothing gets recompiled. I don't have to watch that. If you've ever sat watching MySQL compile for an hour, I'm talking to you. Pre-compiled packages are just the best. All right, so we've done all that, and say yes, and off it goes. And up will come 4 VMs, and we'll turn them into Kubernetes. So that's what that magic URL does for you. Now, having said that, I do not recommend you run the magic URL. Because it's magic, and you don't really know where that URL is going to go tomorrow. Even for my own novelty, I might turn it into something else. So instead, you should get it from the Git repo. Git repos are fantastic. They have logged history, an audit trail of what's changed. And so you should get it from there. But it's the same concept. There is a base manifest that just works. It might not be exactly the Kubernetes you want, but it works, and then you can modify it either through BOSH manifest changes or by talking to Kubernetes directly. And so we get our cluster. Okay? Initially, no access from the internet, which is both good and bad. And that's a confusing thing to say out loud, but it's good because you don't know all the ways in which people might try to hack it, and they don't need direct access. In the same way, your BOSH should not be on the public internet. It opens way too many ports that are not that greatly secured. You should not put BOSH on the public internet. Talk through it through jump boxes. There is the SOCKS 5 proxy you can talk to it through, or VPN. So let's talk about modifying it. So there's this base manifest that just works, but there are going to be some changes you might want. You might try to deploy something like the example Elasticsearch cluster does not work because it complains that it needs privileged containers. Okay, it's your Kubernetes cluster. You think you'd like to turn on privileged containers. There's an operator file for you. If you need a BOSH, operator files are like slight changes. So it takes the base manifest and says, I want to add this or tweak that or whatever. And it's just a couple of different example operator files. There's a big README in the upstream project about all the different operator files. And as you start to learn about what you want in your Kubernetes cluster, you might find there's already an operator file for that. So it's a bit of a back and forward as you learn more about what you want in Kubernetes, about is it already in CFCR project, you need to change something, and that's just the nature of it, but you're going to be able to deploy it. All right, but we can do this. So I've already deployed that. That's what I already have running now. I've got privileged containers turned on. We can now go and run this example. I feel like, it doesn't seem right to not run something for you live. Now, there are a range of different ways to sort of start up things on Kubernetes. I am literally just borrowing stuff from the Kubernetes examples project because, I don't know, they're examples. Like, what am I going to do, make up a brand new example? Like, I came to see Dr. Nick talk because he comes up with the best brand new bespoke examples that I'll never see again. No. This repo's got lots of examples. Now, as we do pods, we'll see them. You know what? I don't know why that errors sometimes. You know what? If anyone does know why this errors, that'd be awesome. Please tell me. I'm a BOSH person, not a Kubernetes person. But the gist of it is you've got your service count, your services, and your replication controllers bringing up a cluster, and that's a terrible example because it looks like it's erroring. Let's pretend I didn't do that. Let's pretend everything's been going perfectly until now. That's a much better project. All right. So we have two things running. We have one thing running and one thing not running. Let's just talk about the one thing running. Let's delete that slide. Let's do that. There's no proof. All right, the guy at the back's recording. There is proof that I did that, so let's not bother. All right, so we've used BOSH to deploy Kubernetes, and obviously we could deploy as many clusters as we want. What do we need to change? The name. Like, that's it. All the IPs were dynamically assigned by BOSH. The only thing we need to change is the name. And you might say, well, Dr. Nick, how difficult is that? And I'll let you know. It's, what are we doing? All right, so that's currently what's already deployed. If I wanted to deploy another one, there's an operator file called operators rename. If I deploy it, it complains saying I haven't given it a name. That's fair. It's a bit harsh of me to say rename it without. Give it a name, a variable called deployment name, and we could call it CFCR2. Expected manifest. Oh, okay. You need to tell. It's like a checksum sort of thing. And off it will go. We'll boot up another cluster. So you can boot up as many as you like. What you might like to do then is to put this on top of an on-demand service broker of some sort. Talk to it with a little CLI. And then perhaps, sell it for many, many dollars under the brand of PKS. Now, I'm not saying you could build your own PKS, but you can. And right. Now, the other thing you can do is you've already got Cloud Foundry. That means you've already gone to all the effort of setting up a secure networking. You've set up some DNS entries in the external world that points to your load balancers, both HTTP and TCP, and you've already got all that working. Why go any other way to do load balancers? Let's just reuse that. And the Kubo team have come up with a solution for that, and that's what we're now going to deploy. And at the bottom, you can see it's just one more operator file. That's why operator files are so awesome. It's like, what's the one story you'd like to turn on? Let's add that. Now, currently, the example I'm giving here is we're not using a lot of BOSH links. I don't think we're using any. I don't know that the BOSH link story is finished yet, but when it's done, these variables I'm about to show you, they'll all go away, and we'll just use links to pull information from everywhere. And it'll be even nicer. But at the moment, we need to get some variables from Cloud Foundry to give it to the Kubo, to the CFCR project, so it can connect to the router, connect to UAA, connect to NATs, and all the things that mean that magical picture that I drew is going to work. So, now the first thing we need to do, let's understand what's about to happen. We're going to not just make our apps or the pods that we run, the services exposed on the routing mesh, we're also going to expose the Kubernetes API so that we can talk to it from my laptop or your laptop if you knew the password. As such, we're going to change the host name for the cluster. It's got some internal DNS at the moment, and we're going to change it. That means we need to recreate all the self-signed certificates because they're wrong, about to be wrong. So we need to delete them first. So let's play with CredHub. Let's play with CredHub. I use Buck because if there's one reason to use Buck is our way of deploying BOSH and also Concourse that has CredHub in it. If there's one thing CredHub likes to do, it's log you out the moment you're not using it. I have this strong belief that CredHub actually connects to the webcam on my laptop, and the moment my eyes move away from the screen, it logs me out. So quickly being able to log back in is highly delightful. CredHub now also supports access through SOCKS 5 proxies, also making CredHub even more delightful than it used to be. So I can now talk to CredHub through my laptop. All right, let's run this find, and we can sort of see that if I made the font bigger, now we can all see that there are two secrets that we need to regenerate the next time I deploy. You might say, well, how do we regenerate secrets? And that's easy. We just delete them, and they'll get created next time when we need them. This whole new life cycle around BOSH and config server and CredHub is just incredible. The CF deployment has 80 secrets that you don't have to come up with. 80. That's 80 passwords that aren't admin. Actually, there's 37 passwords that aren't admin anymore, and 41 certificates that are wrong because you've just been copying them around and never knew what those certificates were supposed to be in the first place. So all we have to do is CredHub delete that one, and what's the other one? Should have copied and pasted. Gone. All right. They will get regenerated when we do our deployment. I said that we need some variables. We've got a little helper script that's going to go off to my Cloud Foundry on the same BOSH and pull down all the variables, and we're going to copy it into a little YAML file so we don't have to do that a lot. Just to be clear that we're all talking about the same thing. On my BOSH, it's the same BOSH that already has Cloud Foundry. So there's my Cloud Foundry deployment. I have my CFCR deployment and some other things. Okay? So that little helper script went off to this deployment, pulled down the manifest, and actually ran some CF commands to get data that it wanted to use. And what it produced is a vars file. This is all the variables that you need in order for Kubernetes or for the Kubo project to connect to the routing mesh. All these secrets you need to know. So you can make this manually, or you can run this little helper script. Or we could finish the link story where you don't have to do anything, and it just works. Oh my God, I love BOSH links. So we have this. Now we just need to run this command. So just to remind you, that's what I've already got running. Like I said, we started the talk in the middle of the story. The walkthrough will take you through everything if you want to go and do the full walkthrough in that README, the one that's linked at the bottom of every page. That's what I've already got. This is what we're going to run now. BOSH likes to give you the diff of what's about to change. And so I'm going to say yes to let it off it goes, and then we'll look at what the diff is. Okay, go back to bigger font. I talked earlier about how the certificates have a host name in them, and that was going to change. If we don't change this, our certificates are just kind of invalid, and then you do what you always do, which is say, just ignore the certificate. No one cared about certificates. You know what? Let's all start caring about certificates. Because it's not that hard to care about them. More and more CLIs are allowing you to give it the explicit root CA, you'll start to see. So, generating your own internal certs becomes a more pleasant thing. So it's doing that. It's going to regenerate those variables. On the master node, which is where the Kubernetes API is running, we're going to run the route registrar job. Now, what that job does is it's the same job that we run next to the cloud controller. It's the same job, I think, we run next to the UAA. So whenever you go to the API.system domain, the reason you can get to that is it's a little process sitting next to the cloud controller saying, hey, I've got the cloud controller on my machine at port 9022. Can you please advertise API.whatever? Any traffic that goes to that, send it to me. So the same router that we use for apps is actually used by the system components, API, Logaggregator, UAA. And so we're going to use the same system. The route registrar is going to advertise now, it's the TCP router that it's advertising to, so it's slightly different, and it's going to advertise a port. So we talk to it not through HTTP, but through a TCP port. Don't exactly know why. I'm not that clever. But I do know that that's what we're going to do. The other thing we're going to add is this new job called route sync, which is going to help us promote our pods, and I'll come back to that one shortly. Okay, so now we're going through, and if you're still not new, and if you're new and unfamiliar with BOSH, this is living with BOSH. You just make a change to the manifest, and it does everything necessary to bring your app, entire system, to the state that you want it to. So while that's working, let's look at some more slides. Eventually, we'll see this new route sync job be run, and I'll talk about what it does. So I talked about the master instance, which runs the Kubernetes API. We're going to promote that all the way through our route mesh. Because of the large size of my boxes, I've kind of merged two route systems together. There is an HTTP route system, and then there's a TCP route system. So this is the TCP route system, and what we'll expect when this all works, if we go to my laptop. So this is now on my laptop, not on my jump box. What I'm expecting is that cluster info, I've already set this up. I did try to get this working before I talk to you today, because that would be embarrassing. Is when it starts working, I expect to be able to talk to my Kubernetes API over that URI. Right, so that public, and if we could do a bit of a dig on it, find out what's going on there, you can see that it's on an IP. And if I was to go to Amazon and find out what's going on with that Elastic IP, we'll find that it's there. And you can see I've given them names because they're very lonely, just being numbers. They don't like just being numbers. They like giving names. Because you don't know who's going to come along and ask the question, hey, that Elastic IP is not being used right now. I might use it. It's like, no, it was mine. I was going to use it on Monday. So I like to give them names so that other people don't come along and steal my Elastic IPs. I also like to change passwords a lot so that people can't get in. All right, so you can see that it's a TCP router, and that's what's used when we deploy Cloud Foundry. So at least we can map all that. This port 8443 is going to be the port assigned on that TCP routing mesh, and the load balancer will be passed all the way through. If you're not familiar, the restriction of TCP routing is that there's no metadata to do routing. When we do HTTP routing, it's an advanced request coming through, and it's got a header. And in the header is like what the request was. And like it will say, I am requesting this URL. And so the HTTP router can look at that metadata and go, aha, you can go after that container. TCP routing is like just a stream of water with no metadata. And so the only way we know where it should go is by what pipe it comes through. And so ports are how we do TCP routing. We assign a port, and everything on that port will go off to backend. How are we going? Still coming up. All right, our workers are updating because of new certificates and a bunch of other stuff. So that will work at the end of this demo. And the route sync. Okay. The way that they've done this, who's actually used Kubernetes and has played with setting up services and load balancers and things? One guy. All right. So I'm just going to lie to you about how it works. None of you know. Okay, no. The way in which the Kubo team or the CFCR team has done it is not yet perfectly natural looking to Kubernetes people. It doesn't show up in the same way, but it works, and it works an absolute treat. The way it works is we're going to give things labels, and that's how this route sync is just a process that's watching for tags, for labels. And if it sees one, it says, oh, I will now go off and advertise routes. Does it all for you. They may make it more native to Kubernetes later on, but at the moment, it kind of looks a little awkward. And this is what we're going to test, and we're going to finish up. This is the last slide. So once it's finished deploying, we'll run one of these commands, and you'll appreciate the magic of what the Kubo team's been doing for the last year. We can run some of these commands now. So, still going. So this is mine. Let's start again. So we're talking to my Cloud Foundry that I've got running for this demo. You can see that I've got an HTTP route because it doesn't have a type, so it's defaults. And you can see I have one that's for TCP. Now, as you all know, that typically you would add a subdomain to this for apps. For TCP, there's no subdomains. That is the endpoint, and it's the port that's going to do the routing. If we go and look at our get service front end, this is our front end. And this is where people are going to get confused, because after we've set all this up, and you know the traffic works, it will still kind of look like it doesn't exist. This route sync thing doesn't show up naturally. And hopefully they fix that in the future. All right, our cluster is up. So whereas before, oops, there we go, cluster info. Now, I can do get all. And so even though I'm on my laptop, I can now reach through my TCP routing mesh and get to my Kubernetes API. What you didn't see is they've set up the certificates and all the login, and it's all on that README, because it'd be boring to watch me copy and paste things. You may have different interpretation of what's exciting and what's boring. I'm going to assume that copying and pasting is not exciting. And I guess the next thing to do is this command. So what this does is it's sort of like tags, sets a label on my service, which is inert and does nothing, except the route sync job looks for them. And if it sees them, it says, I'll take that and I'll add it as a subdomain, and that'll be my route. So once we run this, what I mean when I was saying, it doesn't show up anywhere. I said get services. The fact that I've just set up a route doesn't show up. That's what I mean by it's a little bit invisible. But in the grand finale, eventually it will come up. Oh, my Lord. There we go. Whew, that was exciting for a second. So you can all clap, and that's the end of the talk. I should type it in, clap now. So hopefully you can now see that running Kubernetes and BOSH is a thing. But it is the start of a journey, because there's a lot to learn with Kubernetes, both basic Kubernetes and then the entire ecosystems that are sitting on top of it. Any questions that you'd like answered now or later? All right, thank you very much.